Ethan Harper was a man who lived life one hard-earned day at a time. He wasn't the kind of person you'd notice in a crowd. Average height, wiry frame, and always wearing clothes smudged with oil or grease. But if you looked closer, there was something about him that stood out. His hands. Those hands told stories of countless hours spent tinkering under hoods, tightening bolts, and coaxing old engines back to life. They were strong, calloused, and steady. The hands of someone who knew how to fix things when they seemed beyond repair. Ethan's garage wasn't much to look at. It sat on the edge of town, tucked between an abandoned lot and a row of crumbling brick buildings. The sign above the entrance read, "Harper's Auto Repair," in faded letters, barely legible after years of weathering storms and neglect. Inside, tools hung neatly on pegboards, their worn handles evidence of frequent use. A workbench cluttered with spare parts and half-finished projects occupied one corner, while a rusty radio played soft tunes in the background. It wasn't glamorous, but it was Ethan's world, a place where he poured his heart into every car that came through the door. Life hadn't been easy for Ethan. His father had passed away when he was just a teenager, leaving behind a mountain of medical bills and a family struggling to stay afloat. Ethan dropped out of school to take over his dad's tiny garage, determined to keep it running no matter what. Over the years, he taught himself everything he could about cars, devouring manuals and watching online tutorials late into the night. By the time he turned 25, he had earned a reputation around town as the guy who could fix anything, from clunky old sedans to finicky motorcycles. But despite his skill, money was always tight. His mother, Margaret, suffered from chronic illness requiring expensive medications and regular doctor visits. Then there was his younger sister, Lily, still in high school and dreaming of going to college someday. Ethan worked tirelessly to support them both, often skipping meals or pulling double shifts just to make ends meet. Some nights, as he lay, awake staring at the ceiling, he wondered if all his hard work would ever pay off. Would he ever be able to give his family the stability they deserved? Or was he destined to spend the rest of his life trapped in this cycle of struggle? On this particular afternoon, rain poured down in sheets, turning the cracked pavement outside the garage into a series of muddy puddles. Ethan stood bent over the hood of an ancient sedan, its engine sputtering weakly each time he tried to start. And why? The owner, a nervous young woman holding a crying baby, waited anxiously nearby. "Please, I need this fixed," she pleaded. "I have to get to my second job across town." "I'll do my best," Ethan promised, though he knew the car was practically held together by duct tape and hope. Still, he refused to turn anyone away, especially those who couldn't afford fancier mechanics. After nearly 2 hours of wrestling with stubborn bolts and frayed wires, he finally managed to get the engine running smoothly again. The woman hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face as she thanked him profusely. As she drove off into the rain, Ethan felt a flicker of pride, but it was short-lived. Bills were piling up and the garage itself desperately needed repairs. If something didn't change soon, he feared he might lose everything. Just then, a sleek black luxury car glided to a stop outside the garage. Its shiny exterior gleamed even in the gloomy weather, drawing Ethan's attention immediately. Luxury cars rarely ventured this far out of the city center, let alone stopped at his modest shop. Curious, he wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside to investigate. The driver's door opened, revealing a striking woman dressed impeccably in a tailored coat and designer heels. Her dark hair framed her face perfectly, and her piercing gaze seemed to assess everything around her in an instant. "Hi," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "My name is Victoria Langley. My chauffeur dropped me off earlier, but I think there's something wrong with my car. It's stalled not far from here." She gestured vaguely toward the direction she'd come from. "I saw your sign and thought maybe you could help." Ethan blinked, momentarily stunned. Victoria Langley. Even living on the outskirts of town, he'd heard of her. The powerful CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the region. Photos of her graced magazine covers, and her name was synonymous with innovation and success. What was she doing here, standing in front of his rundown garage? Shaking off his surprise, Ethan nodded politely. "Of course, Miss Langley, let me grab my tools and we'll take a look." As he retrieved his toolbox, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was unlike any other job he'd taken on before. Fixing a luxury car required precision and care, things he was more than capable of. But working on something so valuable made him nervous. One wrong move could cost him dearly. Still, he reminded himself that he'd faced tougher challenges before. Taking a deep breath, he approached the car, ready to prove that talent and determination could shine even in the most unexpected places. Ethan approached the sleek black luxury car with a mixture of awe and determination. The vehicle was unlike anything he'd ever worked on before. Its polished exterior gleamed even under the gray, rain-soaked sky, and every detail seemed designed to exude elegance and power. He opened the hood carefully, almost reverently, revealing an engine that looked more like a piece of art than a mechanical system. It was intricate, compact, and filled with components that Ethan had only seen in pictures or videos online. For a moment, he felt a pang of doubt creep into his mind. Could he really handle something this advanced? Victoria stood nearby, watching him closely. She didn't say much, but her presence alone added a layer of pressure. Ethan could feel her eyes on him as he leaned over the engine bay, examining the problem. "Don't worry," he said, trying to sound confident despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I'll figure it out." Victoria simply nodded, though there was a hint of curiosity in her expression, as if she were testing him in some unspoken way. The first step was diagnosing the issue. Ethan grabbed his diagnostic scanner, a tool he rarely used since most of the cars that came to his garage were older models without sophisticated computer systems. As he connected the device to the car's onboard system, lines of code and error messages began scrolling across the small screen. At first glance, the data seemed overwhelming, but Ethan quickly focused on the key details. "Looks like the fuel injection system is malfunctioning," he muttered to himself. "And there's a sensor issue too." He glanced up at Victoria, who was now leaning against the side of the car with her arms crossed. Her posture suggested patience, but Ethan knew better than to take too long. People like her probably weren't used to waiting around for repairs. Still, he reminded himself that rushing would only make things worse. This wasn't just any car, it belonged to one of the most powerful women in the city. Every move had to be precise. For the next hour, Ethan worked methodically, his hands moving with practiced ease. He replaced faulty sensors, cleaned clogged filters, and recalibrated the fuel injection system using his laptop. The process required intense concentration, and he barely noticed the rain continuing to fall outside or the chill in the air. Occasionally, Victoria asked questions about what he was doing, her tone polite but probing. "How did you learn all this?" she inquired at one point, gesturing toward the tools spread out on the ground. Ethan paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Mostly self-taught," he replied. "My dad taught me the basics when I was a kid, but after he passed away, I had to figure out the rest on my own. There are plenty of resources online these days, so I've picked up a lot along the way." Victoria raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "That's impressive. Not many people have the discipline to teach themselves something so technical." "It's not just about discipline," Ethan said with a faint smile. "It's about needing to solve problems. When someone brings their car here, they're depending on me to fix it. I can't let them down." His words seemed to resonate with Victoria, who nodded thoughtfully. She didn't press further, instead choosing to observe silently as Ethan continued his work. Despite the disparity in their worlds, one defined by boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, the other by grease-stained overalls and struggling families, there was a quiet connection forming between them. Both understood the weight of responsibility, though their burdens took very different forms. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan straightened up and closed the hood with a satisfied thud. "Okay," he announced, turning to face Victoria. "I think I've got it sorted. Let's give it a test run to be sure." Victoria slid behind the wheel while Ethan stood beside the car, watching nervously as she turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, smooth and steady, without a single hitch. A wave of relief washed over Ethan, followed quickly by pride. He had done it. He'd fixed a luxury car worth more than his entire garage, and he'd done it without making a single mistake. "That sounds perfect," Victoria said, her voice tinged with admiration. She stepped out of the car and handed Ethan a credit card. "How much do I owe you?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. Normally, he charged based on the complexity of the repair and the cost of parts. But this situation felt different. Charging too little might come off as disrespectful, while charging too much could seem greedy. After a brief internal debate, he quoted a reasonable price that reflected both the difficulty of the job and his usual rates. To his surprise, Victoria barely glanced at the amount before handing over the card. "You earned every penny," she said firmly. As Ethan processed the payment, Victoria lingered near the garage, glancing around at the cluttered workspace. "You know," she remarked casually, "you're incredibly talented. Most mechanics wouldn't have been able to diagnose that issue so quickly, let alone fix it without specialized equipment." "Thanks," Ethan replied, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. Compliments weren't something he received often, especially from someone like her. "I just do what I can with what I have." Victoria smiled faintly, then surprised him by saying, "You've done such incredible work here today. Would you like to join me for a drive? I think it's only fair you see your handiwork in action." Ethan froze, caught off guard by the invitation. Driving in a luxury car with Victoria. Langley? It sounded surreal, like something out of a movie. But why would she offer such a thing? Was this some kind of test? Or maybe she genuinely wanted to thank him in her own unique way. Whatever the reason, Ethan couldn't deny that the idea intrigued him. Taking a deep breath, he nodded slowly. "Sure, that sounds nice." With that, Victoria climbed back into the driver's seat, and Ethan hesitantly joined her in the passenger seat. The interior smelled of leather and polish, and the dashboard displayed an array of theorized buttons and screens that looked futuristic, compared to the simple controls of his own beat-up truck. As Victoria pulled away from the curb, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly the car handled the road. It was quiet, smooth, and responsive. Everything his old sedan wasn't. They drove through the rain-soaked streets, passing neighborhoods and landmarks Ethan rarely ventured beyond. Victoria kept the conversation light at first, asking about his family and how he managed to keep the garage running despite its obvious challenges. Ethan answered honestly, sharing snippets of his life without oversharing. In return, Victoria offered glimpses into her own world, talking about the pressures of leadership and the sacrifices she'd made to reach the top of her industry. By the time they reached a scenic overlook overlooking the city skyline, Ethan realized he'd completely forgotten about the initial awkwardness of the situation. Instead, he found himself enjoying the ride and the company. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future where opportunities weren't limited by circumstances. Maybe, just maybe, this chance encounter could lead to something bigger than he'd ever dreamed possible. As the luxury car glided smoothly along the rain-slicked roads, Ethan couldn't help but feel like he was living in a dream. The plush leather seat cradled him comfortably, and the hum of the engine was so quiet, it almost felt surreal. He glanced at Victoria occasionally, watching her confident hands on the steering wheel as she navigated the streets with ease. She seemed completely at home behind the wheel of this high-end vehicle, her movements precise and unhurried. For Ethan, who spent most days covered in grease and oil, this ride felt like stepping into another world, a world where problems were solved with a single phone call or a swipe of a credit card. The conversation between them flowed naturally, starting with casual observations about the weather and the cityscape outside their windows. "It's funny," Ethan said after a moment of silence, "how different things look from up here. I mean, I've lived in this town my whole life, but I've never really seen it like this." Victoria glanced at him briefly before returning, her focus to the road. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone curious but not pushy. "Well, for starters," Ethan replied, gesturing toward the windshield, "I'm used to seeing potholes and cracked sidewalks. But out here, everything looks polished and perfect, like someone took the time to smooth over all the rough edges." Victoria chuckled softly. That's an interesting way to put it, but you're right. People see what they're conditioned to notice. You probably spend your days focusing on fixing broken things, while others might only see the finished product. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, I guess that's true. My job is all about finding solutions, whether it's patching up an old engine or keeping a business afloat. Sometimes it feels like I'm always chasing one problem after another. Victoria tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever get tired of it? Always having to fix things? Honestly? Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes, yeah. It's exhausting trying to keep everything together when there's so much uncertainty. But then again, I don't know how to do anything else. Fixing things, it's kind of who I am. There was a pause as Victoria absorbed his response. Then, in a softer voice, she said, You remind me of myself in some ways. When you're building something from scratch, or trying to hold it all together, you don't have the luxury of giving up. You just keep going no matter how hard it gets. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the admission. In his mind, someone like Victoria Langley had it all figured out. She was wealthy, successful, and admired by countless people. How could she possibly relate to his struggles? Sensing his skepticism, Victoria continued, People see the success, but they don't see the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, or the moments when you wonder if it's even worth it. Running a company isn't easy, Ethan. Trust me, I've been there. Her words struck a chord deep within him. Up until now, he'd assumed that someone in her position didn't face the same kinds of challenges he did. But hearing her talk about the weight of responsibility made him realize that maybe they weren't so different after all. Both of them carried burdens, his financial and personal, hers professional and public. But both were driven by a desire to make things better, whatever the cost. The drive eventually led them to a scenic overlook perched high above the city. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the streets glistening under the dim glow of streetlights. From this vantage point, the skyline stretched out endlessly, a sea of twinkling lights punctuated by towering skyscrapers and distant bridges. Victoria parked the car and turned off the engine, allowing the quiet hum of the night to settle around them. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, taking in the view and letting the peacefulness wash over them. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. You know, Ethan, I admire people who work with their hands. There's something honest and tangible about it. You create something real, something that lasts. That's rare these days. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure how to respond. Compliments weren't something he received often, especially not from someone like her. Thanks, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. But it's not exactly glamorous work. No, maybe not, Victoria agreed, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. If anything, it's more important than ever. We live in a world obsessed with shortcuts and instant gratification. People forget the importance of craftsmanship and dedication. You haven't forgotten. Her words lingered in the air, filling the space between them with a sense of mutual understanding. Ethan found himself relaxing a little, letting down the walls he usually kept firmly in place. I guess I just try to do the best I can with what I've got, he admitted. It's not always easy, though. Some days it feels like no matter how hard I work, I'm still stuck in the same place. Victoria nodded sympathetically. I know that feeling. When I first started my company, I faced rejection after rejection. Investors wouldn't take me seriously because I was young and inexperienced. Even when we finally got off the ground, there were times when I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. But you learn to keep pushing forward, even when it feels impossible. Her candor caught Ethan off guard. He'd expected her to be polished and guarded like the version of herself he'd seen in interviews and magazine articles. Instead, she was genuine and relatable, sharing pieces of her story without pretense or arrogance. It made him want to open up too. I think that's why I wanted to bring you out here tonight, Victoria said after a pause. To thank you. Not just for fixing my car, but for reminding me of something I'd forgotten. Hard work matters, passion matters, and talent like yours shouldn't go unnoticed. Ethan blinked, startled by the sincerity in her voice. Unnoticed, He echoed, unsure what she meant. Victoria turned to face him fully, her gaze steady and unwavering. Yes, you have a gift, Ethan. Not everyone would have been able to diagnose and repair that issue with my car as quickly and efficiently as you did. Most mechanics would have sent it off to a dealership or told me it needed expensive parts, but you didn't. You relied on your skill and ingenuity to solve the problem. That's impressive. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest, though he tried to brush off the compliment. It's just what I do, he said modestly. I don't think of it as anything special. Well, maybe you should, Victoria countered gently. Because I do, and I think you deserve more opportunities to showcase your abilities. Don't sell yourself short, Ethan. You're capable of achieving great things if you give yourself the chance. Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply within him. For years, Ethan had convinced himself that his dreams were unrealistic, that expanding his garage or reaching a wider audience was beyond his reach. But sitting here now, listening to Victoria speak with such conviction, he began to question those assumptions. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was capable of more than he'd allowed himself to believe. Before he could dwell on it further, Victoria added, "Let me know if there's ever anything I can do to help. Whether it's connecting you with resources, offering advice, or just lending an ear, I'd be happy to support you however I can." Ethan stared at her, momentarily speechless. This wasn't just idle talk. He could tell she meant every word. Here was one of the most powerful women in the city offering her assistance, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely believed in him. It was overwhelming, humbling, and exhilarating all at once. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot, more than you know." Victoria smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the city lights below. "Don't mention it. Like I said, talent like yours deserves to be recognized. Now let's get back on the road. There's still plenty to see, and plenty to talk about." As they drove away from the overlook, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this evening had changed something inside him. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where possibilities weren't limited by fear or circumstance. And though he didn't yet know how this unexpected connection with Victoria would unfold, one thing was certain. His life had taken a turn he never saw coming. In the days that followed their impromptu drive, Ethan found himself replaying the evening over and over in his mind. The conversation with Victoria lingered like a melody he couldn't quite shake, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and something deeper he couldn't quite name. It wasn't just her words that stayed with him, but the way she had spoken them, with sincerity, without judgment, and with an openness that felt rare coming from someone in her position. She had seen something in him, something valuable, and for the first time in years, Ethan began to wonder if maybe she was right. At the same time, doubts crept in. Who was he kidding? He was just a mechanic from the wrong side of town, scraping by day after day while trying to keep his family afloat. How could someone like Victoria Langley, a billionaire CEO with connections spanning continents, genuinely care about helping him? Maybe it was all just polite talk, a fleeting moment of kindness meant to make him feel good before life returned to its usual grind. Yet, as much as he tried to dismiss her offer as nothing more than a gesture, part of him refused to let go of the possibility that she might actually mean it. Meanwhile, Victoria's thoughts often drifted back to Ethan too. In a world where most people treated her with either reverence or envy, Ethan stood out as refreshingly real. There was no pretense about him, no calculated charm or ulterior motives. What she saw instead was authenticity, a man who worked hard not because he craved recognition but because it was simply who he was. His humility, combined with his undeniable talent, reminded her of her own early struggles when she'd been dismissed and underestimated at every turn. She knew what it was like to have potential others failed to see, and she didn't want Ethan to miss out on opportunities simply because he lacked resources or confidence. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after their drive, Ethan received an unexpected email. It was from Victoria's assistant, sent on her behalf. The message was brief but direct. Ms. Langley would like to discuss some ideas regarding your business. Please let us know when you're available for a meeting. Ethan read the words twice, his heart pounding. Was this really happening? He typed out a quick reply, agreeing to meet the following week, though he couldn't shake the nervous energy bubbling inside him. The meeting took place in a sleek conference room at Victoria's company headquarters downtown. Ethan arrived wearing his cleanest shirt and trousers, feeling painfully out of place among the polished professionals bustling through the lobby. When he stepped into the room, however, Victoria greeted him warmly, putting him instantly at ease. Seated across from her, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, Ethan felt both intimidated and inspired. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation," Victoria began, cutting straight to the point, "about your garage and the challenges you face. I believe you have the potential to grow your business significantly, but I also understand that taking that leap can be daunting. So, I wanted to share a proposal." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. "A proposal?" he echoed, unsure what to expect. Victoria nodded. "Yes, I'd like to invest in your garage, not as charity but as a partnership. You'd retain full control of operations, of course, but I'd provide funding to help you modernize your equipment, expand your services, and reach a broader clientele. In return, I'd take a small percentage of profits until the initial investment is repaid." Ethan blinked, stunned by the magnitude of what she was offering. "That's incredible," he managed to say, though his voice sounded distant, even to his own ears. "But why would you do that? Why take such a risk on someone like me?" Victoria smiled faintly, leaning back in her chair. "Because I see potential, Ethan. Potential in you, in your work ethic, and in your vision. Too many talented people never get the chance to succeed because they lack access to capital or networks. I don't want that to happen to you." Her confidence in him was overwhelming, yet Ethan couldn't ignore the practical concerns swirling in his mind. "It's not just about money," he admitted. "I've got responsibilities, my mom, my sister. If something goes wrong, it's not just me who suffers." "I understand," Victoria replied calmly, "which is why we'll move forward carefully. We'll start small, focusing on manageable upgrades and marketing strategies to attract new customers. And if you ever feel overwhelmed, we'll reassess and adjust accordingly. This isn't about rushing into anything. It's about creating sustainable growth." Her calm assurance helped ease some of his anxiety, but Ethan still needed time to think. Over the next few days, he weighed the pros and cons, discussing the opportunity with his mother and sister. Margaret listened intently, her eyes filled with cautious hope. "Ethan, sweetheart, you've spent your whole life working so hard for us. Maybe it's time to let someone help you for a change." Lily chimed in enthusiastically. "This could be amazing, Ethan. Imagine being able to fix fancy cars all the time and hire other people to work with you. You deserve this." Their encouragement bolstered his resolve, and after much deliberation, Ethan decided to accept Victoria's offer. When he called her to confirm, her relief and excitement were palpable. "You won't regret this," she promised. "We'll build something truly remarkable together." True to her word, Victoria wasted no time getting involved. She introduced Ethan to architects and designers who helped transform his old garage into a state-of-the-art facility, equipped with advanced diagnostic tools, lifts, and environmentally friendly practices. She also connected him with local businesses and luxury car dealerships, opening doors he'd never dreamed possible. At the same time, she encouraged him to stay grounded, reminding him that success shouldn't come at the expense of his values. As the renovations progressed, Ethan found himself growing more confident, not just in his abilities, but in his vision for the future. For the first time, he allowed himself to dream bigger. What if his garage wasn't just a place to repair cars, but a hub for training young apprentices? What if he could give back to the community that had supported him during his toughest times? These ideas excited Victoria as well. During one of their regular check-ins, she suggested hosting workshops and outreach programs aimed at teaching teens technical skills. "Imagine the impact you could have," she said. "Not only would you be running a successful business, but you'd also be empowering the next generation." Ethan grinned, feeling a spark of inspiration ignite within. Him. That's exactly what I want, to create opportunities for people who might not otherwise have them. Their partnership quickly evolved into a friendship built on mutual respect and shared goals. They continued to meet regularly, not just to discuss business but to exchange stories and advice. Victoria shared insights about leadership and navigating challenges, while Ethan offered perspectives on resilience and finding joy in the little things. Each interaction deepened their bond, proving that despite their vastly different backgrounds, they had more in common than either initially realized. By the time the renovated garage officially reopened, Ethan felt like a new person. Standing in front of the freshly painted sign, now bold and vibrant, reading Harper's Auto Repair and Performance Center, he marveled at how far he'd come. The once dilapidated building now gleamed with promise, its interior buzzing with activity as staff members worked alongside eager apprentices. Customers ranged from locals seeking affordable repairs to owners of high-end vehicles trusting Ethan's expertise. On the day of the grand reopening, Victoria attended, proudly standing beside Ethan as he greeted guests and gave tours. Watching him interact with his team and customers, she felt a surge of pride. "You've done an amazing job," she told him later, raising a glass in celebration. "This is just the beginning." Ethan smiled, raising his own glass. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I wouldn't be here without you." Victoria shook her head gently. "No, Ethan. You did this. All I did was remind you of what you already knew. You're capable of greatness." The moment was bittersweet yet hopeful, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to life-changing opportunities. As the party wound down and the lights dimmed, Ethan looked around at the space he had built, not alone but with the support of someone who had become more than just a mentor or investor. She was a friend, a partner, and a testament to the power of believing in others. Months passed and Ethan's life began to transform in ways he had never imagined. The newly renovated garage, now a sleek and modern facility, attracted attention from all corners of the city. Word spread quickly about Harper's Auto Repair and Performance Center, a place where customers could trust their vehicles whether they drove beat-up sedans or luxury sports cars. The combination of state-of-the-art equipment and Ethan's unmatched expertise created a buzz that drew in clients from diverse backgrounds. For the first time, Ethan felt like he was running not just a business, but a brand. The changes weren't limited to the physical space or clientele. Ethan himself seemed different. He walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and carried an air of purpose that hadn't been there before. His days were still long and demanding, but they no longer felt suffocating. Instead, each challenge presented an opportunity to grow, to learn something new, solve a tough problem, or mentor one of his apprentices. The weight of responsibility remained, but it was balanced by the satisfaction of seeing his hard work pay off. One of the most rewarding aspects of the transformation was the impact on his family. With the financial strain easing, Margaret's medical needs were finally being met without constant worry. She attended regular checkups, her health stabilizing thanks to better care and medication. Lily, meanwhile, thrived under the stability Ethan provided. Encouraged by his success, she poured her energy into schoolwork, earning scholarships that would help her pursue higher education. Watching them flourish filled Ethan with a sense of pride he'd rarely experienced before. For years, he'd sacrificed everything for his family, and now he was beginning to see those sacrifices bear fruit. But perhaps the biggest change came from the partnership with Victoria. Their collaboration went beyond business. It became a friendship rooted in mutual respect and shared values. They continued to meet regularly, discussing everything from operational strategies to personal aspirations. These conversations often took place over coffee at a quiet cafe near the garage or during late-night drives through the city streets. Over time, Ethan realized how much he valued having someone who truly understood him, not just as a mechanic or entrepreneur, but as a person navigating life's complexities. Victoria, too, found unexpected fulfillment in their relationship. In Ethan, she saw a reflection of qualities she admired: resilience, humility, and a relentless drive to improve. While her own world revolved around board meetings, shareholder reports, and high-stakes decisions, spending time with Ethan reminded her of simpler truths, the importance of hard work, integrity, and staying grounded. Their interactions gave her a renewed perspective, helping her reconnect with the passion that had fueled her early career. As Harper's Auto Repair gained momentum, Ethan introduced initiatives inspired by Victoria's suggestion to give back to the community. One of his proudest achievements was launching a training program for local teenagers interested in automotive repair. The program offered hands-on experience, mentorship, and even stipends to participants, many of whom came from underserved neighborhoods. Ethan believed strongly in creating pathways for young people who might otherwise struggle to find opportunities. "If I can make a difference in even one kid's life," he told Victoria during one of their brainstorming sessions, "then it's worth every bit of effort." Victoria wholeheartedly supported the initiative, using her influence to secure additional funding and resources. She also helped organize events where students could showcase their skills to potential employers, further expanding their networks. Seeing the excitement in the eyes of the apprentices reminded both of them why they had embarked on this journey together: to empower others and leave a lasting legacy. Of course, the road wasn't entirely smooth. Running a growing business brought its own set of challenges. Some days Ethan faced logistical hurdles, supply shortages, scheduling conflicts, or technical glitches. Other times he dealt with the stress of managing a larger team, ensuring everyone stayed motivated and aligned with the company's mission. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering that maybe he'd bitten off more than he could chew. But whenever those thoughts surfaced, he reminded himself of how far he'd come and of the people counting on him to succeed. Victoria played a crucial role in keeping Ethan grounded during these tougher moments. She didn't shy away from offering advice when needed, drawing from her own experiences leading a global corporation. "Every leader faces setbacks," she told him once after a particularly frustrating day. "What matters isn't avoiding failure, it's learning from it. You're stronger than you think, Ethan. Trust yourself." Her words resonated deeply, giving him the courage to push forward even when things felt overwhelming. Slowly but surely, Ethan developed the mindset of a true entrepreneur, adaptable, resilient, and always focused on solutions rather than problems. By the end of the year, Harper's Auto Repair and Performance Center had become a cornerstone of the community. Customers praised not only the quality of service but also the warmth and professionalism of the staff. Local newspapers featured stories about Ethan's rise from struggling mechanic to successful businessman, highlighting his commitment to innovation and social responsibility. Even competitors acknowledged his achievements, though some did so begrudgingly. Through it all, Ethan remained humble, refusing to let success go to his head. He knew better than anyone how quickly fortunes could shift, and he vowed never to take anything for granted. At the same time, he allowed himself to celebrate the victories, however small. Whether it was landing a major contract, receiving heartfelt thanks from a grateful customer, or simply watching one of his apprentices master a difficult repair, Ethan savored each milestone as proof that his efforts were making a difference. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the city skyline, Ethan and Victoria found themselves driving together again. It had become a tradition of sorts, a way for them to reflect on their progress and plan for the future. This time, they headed toward the same scenic overlook where they had first bonded months earlier. As the car climbed higher, the lights of the city stretched out beneath them like a glittering tapestry. When they reached the top, Victoria parked the car and turned off the engine, allowing silence to envelop them. For several minutes, neither spoke, content to absorb the breathtaking view. Finally, Ethan broke the quiet. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "about how much has changed since we first met. Back then, I couldn't have imagined any of this happening, and honestly, I don't think I could have done it without you." Victoria smiled softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You give me too much credit, Ethan. Yes, I may have opened some doors, but you're the one who walked through them. Every step of this journey has been yours to take. Ethan shook his head slightly. Maybe, but you didn't just open doors. You showed me I was capable of walking through them. Before, I doubted myself constantly. Now I feel like I can handle whatever comes my way. That's growth, Victoria replied, turning to look at him. And it's beautiful to witness. You've built something incredible here, Ethan. Not just a business, but a foundation for your family, your community, and your future. Never forget that. Her words lingered in the cool night air, wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. For so long, Ethan had defined himself by his struggles, viewing them as limitations rather than stepping stones. Now he realized that every challenge he'd faced had prepared him for this moment, for the chance to create something meaningful and enduring. As they sat there, surrounded by the quiet majesty of the city below, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for Victoria's support but for the journey itself. Life hadn't been easy, but it had taught him invaluable lessons about perseverance, humility, and the power of believing in oneself. Most importantly, it had shown him that sometimes the greatest opportunities arise from the most unlikely encounters. "This is just the beginning," Victoria said after a while, her tone light yet hopeful. "There's still so much you can achieve, Ethan. Don't stop dreaming." Ethan nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "I won't," he promised. Not anymore. A year had passed since Ethan Harper first fixed Victoria Langley's luxury car, and the transformation in his life was nothing short of extraordinary. His garage, once a modest and struggling operation, now stood as a beacon of innovation and excellence in the community. The sleek new sign, Harper's Auto Repair and Performance Center, shone brightly against the backdrop of a bustling street, drawing attention from passers-by and loyal customers alike. Inside, state-of-the-art equipment hummed steadily alongside rows of vehicles waiting to be serviced. What had once been a one-man operation was now a thriving hub of activity, staffed by skilled mechanics and eager apprentices. Ethan's days were filled with purpose. He spent mornings overseeing repairs, afternoons mentoring young trainees, and evenings planning expansions for the business. His training program for teenagers had grown into a cornerstone of the company, earning praise from local leaders and media outlets. Many of the participants had gone on to secure jobs in automotive industries or pursue engineering degrees, their lives forever changed by the opportunity Ethan provided. Watching them succeed gave him a sense of fulfillment that no amount of money could buy. But it wasn't just the tangible achievements that made this chapter of Ethan's life remarkable. It was the intangible ones. The confidence he had gained seeped into every aspect of his being. He spoke more assertively, carried himself with pride, and approached challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to grow. Margaret noticed the change too. Her son seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of responsibility and more focused on building a brighter future. Lily, now excelling in her studies, often joked that Ethan was becoming the cool uncle she'd always admired. Victoria remained an integral part of Ethan's journey, though their dynamic had evolved over time. Their partnership transitioned seamlessly from mentorship to friendship, grounded in mutual respect and shared goals. They continued to meet regularly, discussing everything from business strategies to personal aspirations. These conversations often took place during drives through the city, a tradition they both cherished. For Ethan, these moments offered a chance to step back from the daily grind and reflect on how far he'd come. For Victoria, they served as reminders of why she had chosen to invest in him, not because he needed saving, but because he deserved recognition for his talent and determination. One crisp autumn evening, Victoria surprised Ethan with an invitation. "Let's take a drive," she said, handing him the keys to a stunning prototype sports car parked outside the garage. Its design was cutting edge, sleek lines blending with advanced technology under the hood. "This is one of the latest models my company is working on. I thought you might enjoy seeing your influence firsthand." Ethan stared at the vehicle in awe, running his fingers along its polished surface. "Are you serious? You're letting me drive this?" Victoria chuckled, opening the passenger door. Why not? It's partially inspired by your work. We incorporated some modifications based on feedback you gave us about performance efficiency. Consider this a thank you for everything. Ethan slid behind the wheel. He couldn't help but marvel at the irony. A year ago, he'd been tinkering with old sedans in a rundown garage, wondering if he'd ever escape the cycle of struggle. Now here he was, driving a car worth millions, his ideas woven into its very fabric. The engine roared to life as he pressed the accelerator, smooth and responsive beneath his touch. The city blurred past them in streaks of light, the hum of the tires on pavement almost hypnotic. For much of the ride, neither spoke, content to savor the moment. But as they reached the outskirts of town, Victoria broke the silence. Do you remember that day we first met? She asked, glancing at him with a nostalgic smile. How could I forget? Ethan replied, his voice tinged with amusement. You pulled up in that fancy car and I thought, what is she doing here? Victoria laughed softly. I'll admit I wasn't sure what to expect either. But something about you stood out. Not just your skill, but your authenticity. You reminded me of why I fell in love with building things in the first place. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, keeping his eyes on the road. Funny how life works, isn't it? If that car hadn't broken down near my shop, none of this would have happened. True, Victoria agreed, but I think it's more than luck. You were ready for this opportunity, Ethan. All those years of hard work, all the sacrifices you made, they prepared you for this moment. Sometimes, success is about timing, but it's also about preparation. Her words resonated deeply, echoing sentiments Ethan had come to embrace over the past year. Success wasn't handed to him on a silver platter. It was earned through grit, perseverance, and a willingness to seize opportunities when they arose. Reflecting on his journey, he realized how many people had played a role in shaping his path, from his late father, who taught him the basics of mechanics, to Margaret and Lily, whose unwavering support kept him going, to Victoria, whose belief in him opened doors he never knew existed. The drive eventually led them to a secluded hilltop overlooking the city. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. As Ethan parked the car, they stepped out to admire the view. Below, the city sparkled like a sea of stars, its energy palpable even from afar. You know, Victoria began, breaking the peaceful silence. When I first started my company, I used to come here to clear my head. There's something about seeing the world from above that puts things into perspective. Ethan nodded, leaning against the hood of the car. It's humbling, isn't it? Makes you realize how big the world is, and how small our problems seem in comparison. Exactly, Victoria said, her tone thoughtful. But it also reminds me of how interconnected we are. Every decision we make, every action we take, it ripples outward, affecting others in ways we can't always predict. Her words struck a chord within Ethan. Over the past year, he'd seen firsthand how his efforts impacted not only his family and employees, but also the broader community. From providing jobs to supporting local charities, his business had become a force for good. It was a realization that filled him with gratitude and renewed determination. As darkness fell and the city lights grew brighter, Victoria turned to Ethan with a warm smile. I'm proud of you, Ethan, not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you are. You've stayed true to yourself even as your world has expanded. That's rare, and it's something to hold on to. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat, overwhelmed by her kindness. Thank you, he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I wouldn't be here without you. Victoria shook her head gently. No, Ethan, you did this. All I did was remind you of what you already knew. You're capable of greatness. They stood there for a while longer, sharing quiet laughter and easy conversation before heading back toward the city. On the drive home, Ethan reflected on the twists and turns of his journey, the struggles, the triumphs, and the unexpected friendships that had shaped him. He thought about the lessons he'd learned. That success isn't defined by wealth or status, but by the impact you have on others. that resilience is born from adversity, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to life-changing opportunities. When they returned to the garage, Victoria lingered for a moment, watching as Ethan locked up for the night. "Keep dreaming big, Ethan," she said before, stepping into her own car. "And don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. This isn't goodbye, it's just the beginning." As she drove away, Ethan stood in the glow of the streetlights, feeling a profound sense of peace. Life had thrown him countless challenges, but it had also given him gifts beyond measure: a loving family, a thriving business, and a friend who believed in him unconditionally. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that he was capable of achieving great things. In the months and years that followed, Ethan continued to push boundaries, expanding his services and reaching new heights. His story became a testament to the power of hard work, determination, and the transformative potential of human connection. And though his path remained unpredictable, he faced each day with hope, knowing that the best was yet to come.